Spanakopita. If there was one food that I could eat every day, it's Spanakopita. I love it. The crunchy pastry, the spinach filling with herbs and sweet leek is one of my favorite savoury pastries to eat. Here's how I make it. First, I start by chopping a couple of leeks. Just the white part of the leeks, as the green ends of the leeks are very tough and fibrous to eat. I then put that to the side. I also chop some herbs, which is a mixture of dill and parsley, and I put that to the side as well. Then we have the star of the show, spinach. I have 1 kilo of baby spinach that I've washed a few times. It looks like a massive amount of spinach, but once it is cooked, it will shrink considerably. I grab a big pot and put it on the stove. I add a little bit of oil to the pot and about half the spinach and let that cook on medium heat. As it cooks, the spinach starts to wilt down and shrink and release a lot of moisture. I then add the other half of the spinach and allow that to cook also. Once it has all wilted and shrunk considerably, I drain the water that is in the pot. I transfer the spinach into a bowl lined with some cloth. I'm using some clean Chuck's wipes. You should allow the spinach to cool down a bit so that you don't burn your hands. Then grab each end of the cloths and fold them together and squeeze as hard as you can to get out as much moisture as possible. This is an important step. If you don't remove the water, the Spanakopita is going to end up a soggy mess. One of the things that makes a Spanakopita so enjoyable to eat is the crispy and flaky pastry. Once you've squeezed out as much water as you can, discard it and set the spinach to the side. You'll notice now that the massive amount of spinach has now been reduced to a small ball. Then we go back to the pot and start cooking the leeks on a gentle heat. I love adding leeks to a Spanakopita as it adds a mild sweetness to it. Some people like to use onions instead or green onions, but I prefer leeks. Once the leeks have cooked for a few minutes and are starting to brown, I add the spinach in and mix that through for a few minutes to break it up and make sure it is well incorporated. I add the chopped parsley and dill into the pot and stir that all through until well combined. Next comes the salt and pepper. I add a generous amount from the heart, but if you need some measurements, then let's call it a teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of black pepper. I stir that through. I then give it a taste and check if any more is required, which it does, and I add some more salt to my own personal taste. I add a couple of eggs, one at a time, that I've whisked lightly. When you add each egg, mix it very quickly so that the egg doesn't cook and you don't end up with little bits of egg in the mixture. And finally comes the cheese. I'm adding a small block of feta that I crumble in. I'm only adding a small amount as I don't eat a lot of cheese. However, you can add as much as you like. Go to town. Once that has all been mixed in, the spinach filling is ready and we are now able to start assembling the Spanakopita. At this point, I go and switch the oven on to 180 degrees Celsius, which is about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I also grab my baking tray and Filo Pastry from the fridge. I set up my bench space with a baking dish and Filo Pastry close by, as well as the spinach mixture. When you unwrap the Filo Pastry from the box and you are not using it straight away, it is a good idea to cover it with a clean, wet tea towel to prevent the pastry from drying out. I brush the baking dish with some oil to prevent the Spanakopita from sticking to the dish. Then I start with my first layer of Filo Pastry. I grab a sheet and I lay that down on the dish. If the pastry is larger than your dish, that's okay. Just fold it on the sides to make it fit. Also, if you see any tears in the pastry, don't worry, no one is going to see it. Brush it with a small amount of olive oil so that it will become golden brown when cooked, and then lay the next sheet of filo on top. I continue this process until I have added 5 sheets of pastry on the bottom. Once I have laid the bottom sheets, I start adding the spinach mixture. I spoon that in and then smooth it out so that it is evenly laid down around the baking dish. The spinach mixture is reasonably dry, so there is no excess moisture making the filo pastry soggy, which is exactly what we want. Now that the spinach mixture has been added, I add another 5 sheets of filo on top in the same manner I did with the bottom sheets, brushing a small amount of oil on each layer. With the final top layer, I fold the extra side bits on the bottom so that it looks a little nicer on top. After I've brushed the top with oil and done a little bit of tidying up, I grab a knife and score the top sheets of pastry. I like to keep it simple and cut it into small rectangles. Some like to cut it up into diamond shapes. I'll let you decide how you want to do it. The reason you do this is that it makes cutting up the Spanakopita much easier after it's cooked and doesn't make a mess with flaky pastry going everywhere. After cutting it up, it's ready to go into the oven. I cooked mine for about 30 minutes. Take it out of the oven and allow it to cool down for about 15 to 20 minutes. In the meantime, admire that perfect golden color and flaky pastry. It hasn't gone soggy. All that hard work with squeezing the moisture out of the spinach has paid off. Grab a slice of Spanakopita, whack it on a plate, and look at that little beauty. Then, once you're done looking at it, devour it with your heart and soul. And there you have it, how to make Spanakopita. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and consider giving me a follow if you haven't already done so. Feel free to leave a comment to let me know what you think of this recipe, or if you have already tried it, tell me how it went. Also, please check out my other cooking videos for further recipe ideas. Until next time, take care everyone, and Gali Orexi.